Hi, this is Curt Robbins from Higher Learning LV, and welcome to Curt's Cannabis Corner, the weekly video series where we talk about some articles that we published in the past on MJ Headline News. We've got David Rheins from MJBA in Seattle, Hart Steinfeld from Sundial Growers in Calgary, Alana Armstrong with Alana Aldous. If you have some PR stuff, she's really good at that, especially if you're in Canada. She's in Toronto, and Bill Griffin from LXR out of the United Kingdom, and he is currently coming to us from Brussels.
And it's nice to be here from over the pond.
And we're talking about flavonoids. Now, a lot of people know about cannabinoids, right, that are produced by the hemp slash cannabis slash marijuana plant. And there's roughly 150 of those, and they are exclusive to the cannabis genome. No other plant species on Earth produces them. And then there's the terpenes. So that's the second family of wellness molecules. And the interesting thing about terpenes is they're the exact opposite. None of the terpenes that show up in the cannabis genome are exclusive to it. In fact, 20,000 different plants throughout nature produce 40,000 different varieties of terpenes. They're one of the most common types of molecules on Earth. And then there's the third type, and it's kind of the redheaded stepchild because we don't talk about it a lot, but that is flavonoids. Flavonoids are important because one research study showed that in some plant samples, flavonoids are up to 10% of the weight by volume of those wellness molecules.
I just like saying flavonoids. Reminds me of Flavor Flav. When you talk about terpenes and flavonoids, you're really talking about taste and smell. And these are the characteristics that really define the experience of cannabis. And now we're finding out that that experience goes to the psychoactivity and the physical response as well. It's not just aesthetically amusing, but it's actually has beneficial attributes.
Hart, you're in on the action. You work with clients and in a busy legal marketplace on the daily. What are you thinking about flavonoids and maybe their future in the industry?
Yeah, it's super exciting because, as you say, we've kind of all run the gamut of, like, everybody was hot on THC, and then it was CBD and terpenes. But as you say, I love that you call it sort of the red-headed stepchild. But flavonoids really are kind of undiscovered, and nobody's really talking about them that much here in Canada, for sure. As we talk about flavonoids, when you think that we're talking about the flavors of cannabis, but no, we're actually talking about the pigmentation or what the cannabis actually looks like. I think it's pretty cool. Really, I'm excited to talk more about it.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing up that. Yeah, the Latin root of the word flavonoid, flavus, it's easily interpreted by modern English speakers as flavor. That's very understandable. Doesn't mean that whatsoever. It means pigmentation. In fact, in scientific circles, it's often interpreted as kind of an orange, natural, yellow pigmentation. Really, when it comes to flavor, that's mostly the terpenes. So this beautiful pigmentation that we're seeing in some plants turns out is the result of flavonoids.
There are different rainbows of colors when, one typically thinks of green, but really when you think about it, cannabis can show itself in, purples are quite popular, but also things like pinks and blues and oranges and yellows. And really each one is kind of associated with a different flavonoid, and each one can have a different effect or purported have a different therapeutic effect on its own.
Right.
So, it's to me, it's almost more interesting than terpenes, if you want my honest opinion.
I would argue that it's at least as interesting as terpenes, right?
Yeah.
For viewers to inform them some of the major efficacies that peer-reviewed research studies have revealed for flavonoids are anti-cancer and anti-inflammatory. A 2019 very recent study showed efficacy with canflavin A, one of the cannabis-specific flavonoids, for Alzheimer's disease, because it prevented the plaques that build up and sometimes could even remove existing plaques. So it's very promising on the medical side.
Well, it makes sense that it would, possibly have, medicinal effects similar to what we see from cannabinoids and terpenes. As I read in your article, these are produced by the plant as a defense mechanism. As you're growing, you can kind of help the plant to push these colors, by exposure to cold. I know that my plants last year, I was growing them outdoors. So they started to turn these beautiful, it was like these turkey tails of like orange and darker, like purples, and yeah, it was gorgeous. Just kind of like watching them catch the light. It makes it even more of a pleasure to grow even before you're able to smoke the product.
And I'd heard, I didn't know if it was an urban legend, that colder temps, especially toward the end of harvest in the flower period, could result in those purple colors. And of course, if we take it even further, we find out which flavonoids are responsible for those purples. And typically it's just like with terpenes and aroma, it's the collection of flavonoids. They don't exist in nature in isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just cold, it's stress too.
Right. Good
What
point,
they-
David. There are tens of thousands of plants in nature that produce flavonoids, and there's about 6,000 different varieties in nature. About 20 of those show up in the cannabis genome, and a handful of those 20, fewer than a dozen, are specific, what we call canflavins. What are you thinking about flavonoids? We're already in a day. You got terpenes. You're a CBD guy.
I'm kind of looking at it from two ways. So there's one side is like the sort of homegrown cannabis geek in me. So listening to Alana and talking about how they're changing colors, it's really kind of fascinating. But then there's the other side, kind of my business head of selling cannabis products in the UK. We're way behind many states in the US and obviously in Canada. Kind of in the regulatory framework, we're sort of getting it together, but it's still quite strict in what you can actually bring to market and how you can do that. So essentially, we're having isolate CBD with different blends of terpenes. So that's our different product range. So now it's kind of thinking, oh, okay, can we add some flavonoids into the mix? Because right now, anything that would have existed in the hemp extracts, there's then gone through the extraction process and to create the isolate. I doubt there's any flavonoids left after this whole process, and probably very few terpenes as well. If we were to add them, thinking about the implications for that.
What is the commercial implication, and are consumers, let alone the licensees in any position, to start spending extra money on intangibles that really aren't being demanded by the marketplace?
There's no nutritional or health claims that you can make regarding flavonoids. I mean, there's research that you mentioned before that is kind of coming out, but there's nothing we can actually say. So
that's right. It's tough to justify or create a differential from a marketing standpoint if you can't tout any attributes.
Right.
Yeah, and also changing the ingredients in our products. We're going to have to go through the whole regulatory kind of journey again.
That costs a lot of money.
Even in legal states like Oregon, where there's medical and adult use, they just have made Delta-8 illegal. So even in the so-called liberal cannabis states, and based upon really competition from the existing licensees, the existing marketplace, who say, well, hold on a second, we've spent all this time and money and a decade to get here, and now an unregulated market is introducing products and saying this is just like cannabis, except it's
so
legal.
Delta 9 entrenched players are beating up newbie Delta 8
and
players.
10, that's for sure. And in Humboldt, they've made hemp illegal to grow, which is interesting. So
irony.
Yeah, interesting. In cannabis it's now illegal to grow hemp. Well, because they don't want, to adulterate and cross-pollinate with their expensive cannabis.
Right.
And so now you're talking about the same kind of things. All right, well, hard to be natural if we're isolating and then putting it back in, and hard to justify until we understand what the value is.
It certainly allows us to advocate for whole plant.
We're all eating a lot of flavonoids. We're just like in every
just
food
not through cannabis, right?
No, the more colorful the food is, then the more flavonoids are in there. We're not allowed any THC in the UK, so that kind of that rules out.
We got to liberate you guys over there.
Yeah. We got
coming.
I mean, unless it's medicinal.
Yeah, things are very interesting in the UK right now. Tumultuous, frenetic, and a lot of frustrated people trying to get healthy or make a legitimate profit.
From a marketing standpoint, though, I mean, I've always come from the school of find a need, fill a need, find a niche, fill a niche. This seems like a product looking for a market.
In the end, I wonder if it's just home growers and craft growers, craft vendors looking for strains of cannabis and hemp that happen to produce high flavonoid counts, and then that's as far as it gets,
Yeah,
perhaps.
so I'm going to suggest that it is that aesthetic kind of branding thing. You can talk about strong weed, you can talk about cheap weed, you can talk about beautiful weed, and there is certainly a market, particularly on the higher end, if you're selling beautiful colas. Certainly, we're talking about the perps. Yeah, those certainly have a demand. But as you move up the culinary food chain, you spend more for less food that looks more beautiful. Its
Right.
presentation. From a branding marketing, that is a differential as you go to, as a customer comes to the store, just like they look for packaging that's reassuring or seems quality or upscale or whatever, conducive with their lifestyle, complementary to their perspectives.
Right. Mr. Steinfeld, at Sundial Growers, are you guys talking about flavonoids and some of these issues that David is bringing up in terms of shelf appeal, aesthetics, et cetera?
Not really. I don't think we're kind of there yet, even as an industry in Canada, on the rec side for sure. We just are really trying to educate consumers about terpenes right now, and that it's
Right.
not all about THC. Everybody's
Right.
is sort of gravitating towards the higher THC, the better. And what we're trying to do is basically say, it's not all about that number. It's everything in the plant. We talk about the entourage effect. We talk about, just because the THC might only be 22%, there's other things in that plant that are making up the rest of that weight, right? So you're talking about terpenes, we're talking about flavonoids, carotenoids, all those other goodies that come in the plant. So I'd love to get there. I think we've got a lot of work to do before, just in terms of educating the consumers that personally have had cannabis that's like 15%, but like a lot higher on the terp side, that blew my socks off in terms of
That's
potency, right? Like I always talk about how, the more pungent the plant is, the more potent I think it's going to be. And that's not always evident. You don't smell THC, right? So, so that's kind of important. I think, hopefully we'll get there.
And what Hart said is really hitting home for sure, because a lot of these companies do want to, and whether it's a retailer or the licensed producer who's making the product, dispelling the 20% and higher THC myth that it's got to be 20%. And of course, all of the jars and packages and bags are solid, so you don't get to see the wow effect of the flower before you buy it. Hopefully we'll get to a place where the regulations allow us to display the flower in a way that honors it a little bit better, so that consumers can really get a look at what they're going to purchase, so that they can broaden their horizons in choice.
It sounds like in all these jurisdictions we're talking about, that it is challenging for companies at all levels to differentiate themselves. Dave talks a lot about differentiation. They're trying to achieve differentiation, but sometimes onerous packaging regulations prevent that. So it sounds like flavonoids offer some opportunity to differentiate, but at the same time, there's a lot of other commingling issues here.
It's a mature market strategy, and we're not there. I mean, we're as close as you get on the West Coast, and it's still too early for that.
And now I'm interested in the flavonoid profile as well. I think it adds like a really nice story to product to talk about this and to make the consumer feel educated. So
yeah, the testing labs are going to be pissed at us, because they're like, look, we just got the terpenes in the mix, now you're tossing these flavonoids at us, what the heck.
And labeling, right? So you're talking about packaging from a brand perspective, but labeling from a regulatory perspective.
The difference between eating it and inhaling it, so whether you vape it or whether you're smoking it, what's going on there? How is that getting into your body in a different way? Or is it just completely destroyed before it?
That's an excellent point, Bill. In fact, I was looking at a research study just last week that showed that the bioavailability of the same plant sample vaped versus smoked was roughly twice as much. Now, that's just a single study, but when we double bioavailability, which is where it all comes down to the line for efficacy, adult use or medicinal. But the whole topic of bioavailability, you've got, tinctures going sublingually directly into the bloodstream, not having to pass through the stomach and the liver for digestion. So there's pros and cons to all of these consumption avenues.
Maybe flavonoids will resonate more with consumers just by the fact that they're more familiar with flavonoids than they are with terpenes. And the fact that, when we talk about flavonoids, I think Bill mentioned, ingesting flavonoids, it's sort of, we've been kind of taught to sort of eat the rainbow, like all foods with different colors.
That's right.
So we can kind of express that through with cannabis. Maybe we talk about smoking the rainbow.
Good point.
Smoke the rainbow. Hashtag smoke the rainbow.
Smoke the rainbow.
Hart, you need to put a little TM beside that. Protect your IP.
I saw the study about butterflies absorbing and displaying the color that they take in from flavonoids.
They don't actually synthesize these pigments in their own body chemistry. So they ingest the flavonoids from plants they eat, and then it goes in and creates these, gorgeous wings that are so coveted by photographers.
Flavonoids, if you could take it from cannabis and get a color, and then you can color, I don't know, hemp clothing with
there you go.
Derived from hemp.
That's thinking outside.
Should we patent that one as well?
Like I've seen, you can make all kinds of plastic items out of hemp, like a grinder set made out of hemp, but colored with flavonoids.
Mr. Rheins, what's your summary of these
flavonoids?
My
flavonoids may be a marketable element in the cannabis attribute portfolio, but at this point I think it's a little in the future and a little esoteric for most folks, although I think what we're starting to see is our understanding and appreciation of cannabis is moving beyond the simple identification of potent THC or even new phytomolecules like CBD. Now we're starting to really understand that the entourage effect that so many of us tout is really because there are so many individual elements that have potency and efficacy.
Most studies show more than 400 different types of phytomolecules, so it gets extremely complicated.
Yeah, so we'll be learning about this for many decades. We're moving beyond just cannabis as a recreational or purely medicinal commodity. It really plays a part in a lifestyle across many, many, many verticals.
Hart, what do you think about these flavonoids? Is it real? Is it hype?
No, it's real. I'm looking forward to diving more into this and to seeing where the industry goes with flavonoids. Maybe I'm looking forward to the time when I can say, well, I smoke weed for the antioxidants.
Alana, what do you think about these flavonoids?
Well, I am looking forward to a whole spring and summer full of flavonoids on my plate, in my garden. I'm going to enjoy them even more now, maybe pass along the information and show people a little bit more about what they're getting when they open up a jar and smell that purple and see that purple.
Exactly. And some of the research is showing significant anti-cancer mechanisms, specifically apoptosis, that genetically pre-programmed mechanism where cancer cells basically kill themselves. And certain terpenes and cannabinoids and flavonoids have been shown to do that. So not only fun to consume, but good for you too. Bill, how do you summarize these new kids on the block?
These new kids on the block. So I'm excited about flavonoids now. I think if you're as a consumer or a bud tender or anybody who's kind of talking or telling a story about cannabis, you've got the cannabinoids kind of done. You've moved on to your terpenes, and then you've got to start exploring the flavonoids and talking about this and bringing that into the conversation.
Well, it's one of three significant groups of phytomolecules that we get from hemp. To exclude it from the dialogue is to discuss only 2/3 of the equation. That's how I look at it as a technical writer.
Yeah, so what's got to be next then is the tactile. So we'll start talking about the texture as having a beneficial effect. So stay tuned to Curt's Cannabis Corner for more.
I want buds I can scratch myself with. Just I got an itch right here.
Wait, how crunchy is it?
Crunchy, extra crunchy this week. Yeah,
smooth and silky.
thanks for helping us produce another episode of Curt's Cannabis Corner, where we discuss flavonoids. We will see you next week. Thanks again.
Cheers.